All right, folks, is another episode of Remodelers on the Rise. Jef, you've been doing this remodeling thing for a while. Are you still on the rise? Have you arrived? Does a remodeler ever arrive, or is it always rising to the next step or level?
I think it's always rising. You always got to be curious and always learning.
If you get stuck on, like, I've made it, or I'm stuck in my ways, or you're not evaluating anything new, I think it does, one, it doesn't get as fun, and two,
Right?
you get stuck, you can get stale easily.
Very much
Um,
so.
Luckily, I'm talking to somebody that I don't have a worry that he's ever going to run into that, because Jef, you are somebody that is always kind of learning and thinking and brainstorming and thinking strategically. You asked me if the blur behind your video, for those of you watching the video version, was okay, and I said yes, it's fine, but I'd love to know what's back there. And you said it is my first quarter goals. Some of them are checked off, some of them are ongoing. But let that be a reminder to any remodeler watching this. How did your first quarter goals go? What do your next quarter goals look like? If we get complacent and we aren't kind of charting a course or setting goals, chances are we're going to kind of just meander and not be as effective or get the results that we're after. So there's 2 cents on that. So Jef Forward with Forward Design Build is here today. Jef, welcome.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
You betcha. Jef and I are just going to make this an annual thing. Last April 2021, he came on the show, and here in April 2022, he is as well. I'm going to kind of set up. Jef, you can introduce yourself after I do this kind of setup of today's show, and then we'll get into the main content. But today's show came from a post that a gentleman named Drew Hickok, I think I pronounced his name correctly. Drew, if I butchered that, I apologize. But he posted this, it's actually a few months ago, and he posted it in Remodelers Community. If you are not part of Remodelers Community, if you're listening to this in podcast form, go to Remodelers, with an S, community.com. It is a tremendous group of remodelers who are there to help one another. It's good, isn't it, Jef?
Yes, it's great. It's a lively conversation every day.
Every day. And Drew made this post and he said, does anyone have recommendations for increasing the self-awareness and emotional intelligence of a team? And he kind of told a quick story. I have a couple of very organized, proactive project managers that are good at their job, but are sort of on the engineer, quote unquote, side of the people skills spectrum. We have a goal for addressing this as the year goes on with some training, but I need to focus on how to achieve this and to speed it up. He had just gotten a text from a client asking to meet and discuss this very issue. The client explained that they know, based on their project manager's care for their job and all other aspects of the company, that the PM is not a jerk, but his tone and approach to them is getting on their nerves. They describe it as feeling cold or snarky or condescending. He said he has some specific examples written down and he was going to share them with them. And Drew offered to get a coffee or beer to discuss things early next week. So that was the situation. And then Jef commented on that with some ideas, a book recommendation based on this, and then also talking about the value of DISC, DISC, DISC assessments, and how he has used that and integrated that into his hiring, into his ongoing management, and it's really helped with this type of topic. So Jef, when I saw you post that, I said, there's a great Remodelers on the Rise show to unpack how a remodeler has embraced and uses DISC profiles. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Jef, if you could just introduce yourself, tell the people who you are, a little bit about your business, and then I'm going to ask you a first question about DISC.
Okay. Jef Forward, located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are a design first design build company. We have approximately 35 people on staff, and we focus on high-end residential and high client touch service.
Now, you said design first, design build. Can you tell us more about why you said it that way?
Because we approach design first as a mentality versus just pushing people right into production. And I'm not versus a production first. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's a bad model. We choose to spend a little bit more time in design, and with the idea that once we're in construction, things are just going to run that much smoothly and it allows our designers to really flush out all the details for that fit and finish aspect of the project.
And just really emphasizing that, we're different, and here's part of the reason why is we really put more attention and effort and focus on the design side. Excellent.
Right.
Cool. So tell us kind of how did you get involved in disc profiles? How did you start to get familiar with them? What was kind of the start of that for you?
The start of that for me, honestly, was my very first meeting in Remodeler's Advantage.
Yep.
We did a test, a one-day paper test in my very first kind of big group meeting, and I was actually singled out in that process because I was so out of balance. My D was way at the top, everything was below the line, and I had a lot of stress in my life and anxiety about the business at that time because we were failing and failing hard. So that was a clear understanding that I needed to get a better awareness of myself and balance myself out. So that was my first real exercise into it.
So you may have heard of it before, but as far as actually taking the disc profile, kind of seeing the results, that was the first one. And then what I've experienced with disc is, as I took it myself and kind of studied it and go, yeah, that's pretty close to how I would describe me. Or I've seen other clients of mine take it and kind of I know this client very well, and then I read their disc. It's been very accurate and solid there. So after you had done that initial test, what did you do next? Did you start getting some of your team involved in it? How'd that work?
Well, I didn't have very much of a team at that point.
Okay.
I really just started to read about it and start to understand myself a little bit more. So it was probably another 1.5 to 2 years before I had my team do it. And, this was going back 15 years.
Okay.
And but once I realized the profiles, that I started to look at our job descriptions and the roles within our company, and I was able to align that this role really demands or needs this type of personality trait for them to be successful. And that was my first kind of aha moment with it. And I started to develop profiles that I felt would work for the roles we had. And I had just a lot of other people that I knew using it. And so it was just kind of always a topic of conversation.
Gotcha.
Very good.
Very good. So why don't you do a little, would you say you're an expert at disc? Would you say you're a quasi-expert at disc?
I would say I know a lot about it, but I wouldn't qualify myself as an expert.
But I would say, Jef, why don't you teach us just a little bit, what is disc? How would you describe it, and what is kind of it aiming to achieve?
So disc is it's a personality assessment, and it covers, it started way back in the I believe the 20s, and it gained some popularities in the 50s, and in the 70s they started to use it as a business model for helping educate people. And the idea is that everyone has 4 quotients or 4 main qualities of their personality: D for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for compliance. And it just puts it into a graph and shows you kind of where you're at, what your proclivities are, so to speak. And and there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's a statement of what it is. And the really interesting part for me is seeing how other people, once they read their disc assessment, whether they agreed with it or not. And that I found very interesting. And anyone who disagreed with it, they eventually did not work for us anymore, just because there became a clear presence that they weren't accepting their behavior. It didn't line up. So that's the gist of it.
Got it. So one of the things that you mentioned a question before was, I went back, and what I did was I started studying it, and then I started studying mine. And I don't know if you use this phrase or not, but synonym of it was, I just started studying and having some self-awareness of my own personality, of my own behaviors. Sometimes that phrase self-awareness, sometimes we don't even realize that we're kind of acting a certain way, or we don't realize the impact of that. You laughed at that. That was funny.
Yeah, that
It is
was
true.
very funny.
Yes,
Right.
we don't, right? Where it's like, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And sometimes these profiles can help us kind of see it in a new light.
Hmm.
Self awareness. So I thought it'd be funny or interesting rather to I just pulled
Yeah.
up these two little screens. So what you're seeing for people listening on the podcast is on the left hand side I have my disc profile. On the right hand side I have Jeff's profile. And in both of our cases, we are very high on the D, on the dominance aspect of it. You are very high on the influence, and I'm kind of middle of the road. We're both very low on the steadiness, and we're
Right.
both kind of in the middle on the compliance. So, being a gentleman who has studied this for a while, tell the people what you see on these two charts. Tell us about these two individuals.
So the results orientated, the D, is you're right on the spot. You're going to be short and to the point, and
Mm,
you're going to communicate very directly. With your I being the next, you're still going to have a focus on influencing and inspiring people to see a difference. The S tells me that you're with a low S. You're less consistent, and you tend to be driven by the daily challenge, which may take you in different
mm,
places. And then the C, you're right in the middle on the C, so that tells me that you embrace details,
mm.
and can enjoy that.
Interesting. And then
Yeah.
yours, what is a little bit different on yours?
Well, the D is the same there with being results orientated,
I'm
but
just a little more direct than you, but not a lot more direct.
just a little bit,
Yeah.
yes. And the I, with that being the highest, for me, it's about I see someone who is, whenever you get a high I, it's somebody who likes to talk and likes to influence people, inspire people, show them kind of, in my case, kind of what's possible. And that is both with our clients and with our team and their future. That's a big part of what my role is. And I've had to work really hard to get that I where it was, because it
Mm.
used to be really, really low. And then the
You've taken
S,
this every couple of years type thing?
I haven't taken this in, I want to say 5 years, but
Okay.
I need to, because I've been really working on my S to try to be more consistent for my team. They've asked me to do that. So I've been working on that. And then my C is, it's actually below the middle, and which still surprises me, because I think I'm pretty detail
Mm.
orientated, but that just tells me that I'm putting more focus on the I, and with leadership, and that I don't have to be in the weeds figuring stuff out. That I'm able to. My team does that
Yeah.
when we need to.
So even your ability to kind of explain and lay out what you're seeing just based on looking at this chart, it's speaking to the
Hmm.
fact that you've studied a lot of these, and I can just hear it in your voice of going, and in the way you're describing this, of saying, when we're going through the hiring process, when we have somebody take this, when I'm trying to understand an employee, of course
Hmm.
I'm going to do that just through the conversation I'm having, through the results I'm seeing or the results I'm seeing, but to have this also as an aid to perhaps help you understand more clearly how to best communicate with them, how they're going to best respond. One of the big things with DISC is that, and you said it earlier, there's not necessarily a right one or a wrong one. It is what it is. It's just revealing kind of the strengths and weaknesses, and each one of us have strengths and weaknesses. But it's interesting
Right.
how you're using this to better manage your team. And that's kind of where I want to go next, which is, yes, why do you use it? Let's start actually there, and then we'll talk about kind of how you use it. So why do you use this, and how has it been helpful for you?
So the why, it's all about education for me, and it's a tool that I can use and share with the team, specifically with conflict resolution, with having people understand other people, having people understand how to approach other
Mm,
people, how to handle them again in conflict. And I don't want conflict to sound like a bad thing. Healthy conflict is the best thing that we can master as remodelers. And this as a tool, it just helps me. And I'm looking for a little shortcut thing that I swear I just had.
Uh-oh.
It's a little shortcut card,
You
which
moved your glasses up so you could try to see it.
yeah, it's a little shortcut card that helps me. Here it is, right under my, like,
Oh, there's
yeah,
the blurry
I
way to
got the
throw it
blur
off.
on,
Yeah.
but so a lot of my players on the team have this, and so they're able to quickly reference how to talk with somebody. Like
Oh,
once they recognize somebody might be a high D, once they might be a high I or a high C or a high S. I have all this stuff down now, but actually I got this from my one of my project coordinators, and who operate as our salespeople, and it's a reminder for how they should be how they should speak with people. High D's, you need to be direct. You can have a little bit of an elevated voice. With S's, you want to take your time in responding and let them really see that you're listening. So it's just that's the why. It's to
yeah. I mean,
educate my team.
that is interesting. That right there is interesting. When, what did you say about healthy conflict and remodeling?
I think it's the most important skill to master.
Hmm. You're telling me that once we get all the processes and systems and all the checklists and the right people in place, that there's still going to be conflict in a remodeling project and process? That's not going to go away?
Uh, yes.
Yeah.
And despite how professional, despite how well you do, just people have short memories, and you
Yeah.
always need to be reminding them. And from time to time, when there's a conflict, it's the best way to do it is to address it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And this disc is knowledge that helps disarm your fear that you might have in addressing somebody who's a high D or a high C, because
Mhm.
we've all had those clients that are super exacting. Well, this helps us with high C clients all day long, and very demanding clients. Again, it gives us a strategy for that,
Yeah.
and it
Because
really helps disarm them as
because
well.
you start to see different traits, just even if they haven't taken the little test, you can start to see that in
Right.
clients. But one thing that you said related to managing the team, managers managing staff on the team,
Right.
one thing that we all have to realize when it comes to people management and managing our team is there is not one right way to do it. What works for somebody and the tone will not work for somebody else. There's a lot of
Right.
factors at play, and what you're talking about here is, look, my managers and the rest of my team, we know each other's personalities better. We're not going to
Mhm.
talk a little more forcefully to somebody that's a high D because we're wanting to be condescending or something like that. We're going to because we
Right.
know that person, that's the best way that they communicate. And I know if I take that same approach to the person that has a low S, that is going to
Right.
bulldoze them, and it's going to be very disruptive to the point that we're trying to make
Right.
or the result we're trying to get. So
Right.
this isn't an overnight thing, but if you're going to manage people well, you need to have a lot of that emotional intelligence and know your team well. This is a tool to help you do that. Any other follow up on that?
That it all leads back to leadership as well.
Mm,
So this really helped me become a better leader by getting to know my team better, and then realizing why I was doing this. So it just builds self-awareness
mm.
for everyone.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about how we use it in a second. But let's say somebody's like, it kind of sounds interesting, guys. Where do I go for more information? Where would you point them? Isn't there?
Just
Go ahead.
discprofile.com. But honest, that's the service we use,
Yep.
and I like to use that service because it gives me the same format I'm used to.
Yep.
If you just Google disc profiles or disc assessments, you're going to get a
Find a bunch of
plethora
them.
of, yes.
Yeah. So if you're kind of curious about this or you've never done it before, just search DISC profiles. You might pay $30, $40, $50, $60, and take one of the tests and just go through
Mhm.
it yourself and have it, have the results, and that's a good place to start. So talk a little bit more about how do you use it. So I remember last year you hosted a little meet and greet for me when I was doing an event. Down in the Ann Arbor area. And when I was walking through your
Mhm.
office, and actually I'll pull up the little picture here. When I was walking through your office, I saw you weren't standing there smiling next to it, but you did send that picture. But I saw this on your wall, and what it's kind of showing is it's got people's names next to each. So down here, kind of between C and S, we got Lynette and Christine and Jeff B and Kevin and Brian. Over here, Chad is over in the D area. Andrew and Mark are way up in the I enthusiasm side.
Right.
So
Mhm.
tell us how this works, and generally, how are you using DISC in your business? But maybe starting by showing or explaining what this is and how you're using it in the office.
So this is obviously it's a big chart in the office, and I apologize. I don't know how I did this, but I happened to zoom in on
Yeah,
my
now
face
yeah.
here.
Well, it happens.
With
You did
with
say you just moved over to the Mac and
right.
something changed, but it is what it is.
So okay.
For the most of the
Um,
people will be listening via podcast, so no problem.
okay. Well, so this is a big chart in the office, and everyone is on it. So when a new person comes in, they get assessed before they're hired, and their name goes on it. And I just hand wrote the number of people on there,
Hmm.
which is interesting. So I'm in the red at the top at the ID, and a part of this, what I needed to do, going back 7, 8 years ago, was hire to my weakness,
Mm,
and my weakness was S all
mm.
day long. So you can see we've got
I mean,
15.
Jeff, I think you overdid it though. Like 11 people on an S to just offset your one, high ID. I mean,
Well, so what's interesting, they're SCs.
yep.
So in that quadrant, so of the S's, I've got 24, yeah, and 11 on the above,
Mm,
and so honestly, like there's some SIs in there as well, but I find the S's we get a lot of traction with S's on the team and culture, but all the way around. But
mhm.
it's just an interesting mix, in that it kind of also goes to the roles that people are in.
Yeah. And
Um,
why do you think you guys are pretty heavy down into that S area? Why do you think that is?
well, because project development takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of patience, and so all of our designers, almost all of them, have some portion of S is strong, where they have the patience to be modeling drawings and working through selections, at their desk,
Mm,
for 40 hours a week. Where like someone, Kyle, with your disc, you would not do well sitting at the same desk performing, similar
yeah.
repetitive tasks, even though they're across different clients.
Yeah.
So that's our rationale with that.
Gotcha. We had a question. Jim McKenna just asked, does it ever feel invasive or intrusive to your staff to take the assessment?
We get a little, I don't want to say pushback, but so in the interview process, that's where we start the conversation and we start educating them at that point. So once they understand that it's really a part of getting on this team, that they're willing to take it.
Hmm.
And I'm also looking for certain characteristics to match with the role we're looking for. And I'm also looking for their willingness to learn about themselves and if they agree with it or not.
Hmm.
And that's like we use this tool all the way through, the hiring process. And then as they grow within the company to different roles, and how we handle any kind of improvement aspects, we can refer to the disc and learn how to best communicate with them on that. And they also use it to interact with each other. They'll look up somebody if maybe they're having just a little bit of a challenge
Hmm.
in terms of like a project manager and a project designer communication. So ultimately, no, everyone's on board with it. And when we're bringing somebody in, that is a constant question. What is their disc? Well, can we see it? Yes, it's posted
Hmm.
in Drive. So it's actually, I find it really fun.
Interesting. As far as how it's received by the people, in one of the notes you said for people that are curious, for people that are curious and kind of want to know these things,
Mhm.
it's pretty well. Are there other people that are kind of like, it's just a bunch of hogwash. This isn't really helpful. You get some of that.
No, they're not on my team.
Okay. Hmm. There you have it. There you have it. Now, there's a lot of other, there's Enneagram. There's a lot of other kind of profile personality stuff. You're somebody that studies hard. Have you flirted or done any of the other ones, and then kind of came back to this, or what's been your experience with that?
I haven't. I've heard of like the Briggs Meyer,
Yep.
but I haven't. This was the one I kind of broke in on and really impacted how I thought about myself, in the role as a business owner that had the most impact on me. So I've stuck with it.
Kind of run with that. Okay. As far as a pitfall of it not being accurate, what's been your experience with that? Has it been pretty solid? Have you seen some times where there's a bit of an anomaly? What have you found there?
Well, so sometimes when people are filling it out, it will come back with an error, meaning that the person wasn't necessarily honest or in their answers, and because there's obviously an algorithm that happens, and sometimes that algorithm gets tripped up. And I will have asked people to retake it, and I'll get the same response back, and I haven't moved forward with them. So I put a lot of stock into this. And there's little things here and there that people might say, yeah, I can see this, but I don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll revisit them in a year or 2 years with another assessment.
Got you. Good.
And specifically revisit that.
So going back to the story I kind of shared that was the impetus for this was Drew kind of commenting on that project manager. So as you heard that story of a client kind of feeling like it's kind of cold or snarky or condescending, the project manager having a little bit more of an engineer side on the people skills,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your initial assessment or things that you would do as a leader given that situation? And what's your
Well,
hunch of what's going on?
I would be educating my project manager about their tonality, the words they're using, the pace, and also I would challenge them to profile the other person in terms of their DISC assessment. What do they think they'll be?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll review the strategies on how to talk to that profile. And
Yeah.
that is something that is just a kind of a conversation that we're always having. I have a high D project manager, and he gets a lot done, but he needs probably the most coaching with how he talks with people. But he's very receptive to it and practices it. And he's also 5 years away from retirement, so he's a little bit. I'm doing my best, and we appreciate that he's willing to learn from it. And but on our end, we will try to also align him with certain types of clients as well.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. So, a big thing that you just shared that I pulled out of it is, I'm thinking of remodelers who are listening to this. Yeah, I'm talking to you, whoever you are. I'm thinking of remodelers who are listening to this, and I heard a couple things of what you just said is like, this is a conversation we have all the time in the office. This is a conversation that, there's some of my team that need more coaching on how to communicate with our clients, that need more coaching and guidance and leadership from me on how to deal with their fellow coworkers. So as a business owner, if you're listening to this as a remodeler, you need to put on that hat of, I've got to study and know my team. I've got to study and know their personalities. I got to understand how this works, because a huge part of your job should be coaching and guiding and helping with those things. I think some remodelers are so busy just putting out fires and dealing with this mistake or dealing with this change order or dealing with this difficult thing that we don't get to that next level of leading, of truly leading our team well. So I think what you're sharing there is a little bit of maybe aspirational or something. You're maybe showing an example of where a lot of other remodelers need to get to, of place where they continue to delegate the work to their team, and a big part of your job turns into leading your team well, teaching them how to communicate. And if you're not great at it, practicing how that is. Somebody just said, definitely the hardest part of the job is staff management. Also the part that can create the most value It is hard. It is hard. But Jef didn't accidentally figure this stuff out. Jef isn't accidentally coaching his high D personality project manager. He's studied this. He's worked at it. He's put in time and time and time in it. And yes, there is tremendous value in it. There's clients that are happier because of it. Anything you'd add to that?
So I had it before the recession. I had a team of about 14 people, and we went through the recession. I took it down to one other person besides myself. And coming out of the recession, I said, I really have to do a better job. I want to be a team and not a single, relying all on subcontractors.
Yeah.
That's just a different model for us. And I really doubled down on, saying, I don't really want to bring anyone back that I had. And that was primarily my fault because I wasn't as good of a leader as I should have been. So I really immersed myself in that, and, just doubling down on the assessment, the DISC assessment.
That's great. That's great feedback. How Jim said, how do you keep yourself accountable to your team using this? How do you keep yourself accountable to your team using this?
Well, so it builds awareness of your opportunities for improvement. So my opportunity is, I have a very low S. So we have, right now I'm in an accountability commitment with them, and that I have somebody who, and this is kind of outside of this, but we're using the S to set, or I'm sorry, we're using the DISC assessment to set where I can improve. And for me, it's at consistency. And so, and I have somebody who's helping me through that, and I'm, literally reporting back to the team or into my leadership group on a monthly basis in terms of, they're rating me how I'm doing.
Excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah. And we can then use that for other players as well.
I like that. Somebody else said DISC is a good tool. There are some others, and we kind of mentioned that or asked about that. I find different tools work better for different management styles. So there's some truth to that. I think also sometimes as business owners, we can kind of chase the next shiny thing. I mean, the bottom line is there's pros and cons to any of these personality profiles, any of these assessments. There's pros and cons, absolutely.
Right.
And there's something to be said for going deep into one and really embracing it and really integrating it versus, well, we did a little bit of this, then we did a little bit of that. Sometimes our team can view us as going, man, I just can't even keep up with you. You're always doing this, and then it's that, and this was the hottest thing. Now this is the hottest thing. You've gone very deep into this of like, no, this is part of our culture and who we are. We care about this. So interesting thought.
Yeah, and that kind of goes across the board. So one of the things that I see a lot with remodelers is change. Change, like high I, change is easy, and let's go. We're figuring out something different. And a part of what I like to talk about with people is really dig into the tools you have. So for all you Builder Trend users out there, you haven't even scratched the surface yet, most of you, in terms of all the tools and functionalities that are there for you. And a lot of times we're going to it, and I don't use that, but just in software in general, use the tool that you have until it's broken, and then look for another source.
Comment that said, yes, that is awesome. Talking about the accountability, putting your own feet to the fire. That's where the buy-in happens. I agree with that. Good. So I think my takeaway from this little lovely chat we had, Jef, it kind of went that route that I just shared, related to, hey, remodeler, if you're a business owner and you have a team, a good chunk of your time and effort and learning needs to be related to how do you manage them well. And that means reading books. The book that you mentioned, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, was a book that you threw out to Drew when he made that post. But also it's getting to know your team, and not just at a surface level, but using tools like DISC or something else to really have more awareness of how people will respond well, what they will respond to well, what their strengths and weaknesses are, how to continue to coach them up in areas of weakness, and to do that in between, here's what I want to say, Jef, I'm stumbling on it, but between their fellow co-workers, that is a huge area. So that's my big takeaway from this. Jef, if you were to kind of summarize and say, here's one kind of key thought that I would leave everybody with on this topic, what would that be for you?
I've spent a lot of time trying to build the right team, get the right people on the bus, and this has been a tremendous tool to help me do that.
Hmm.
So, like, I find it invaluable, and I think we pay like $85 an assessment, and it's worth every penny.
Yeah.
I think it's
Excellent.
a bargain, but
Some would say a steal, an absolute steal.
right.
Cool. Excellent. If you look up Forward, Forward design build, you can find Jeff's website. If you want to reach out to him, I bet you can figure it out from his website. How else could people reach out to you? Is it Jef at Forward Design?
Jeffrey at planforward.net. JEFFREY at planforward.net.
Bingo.
And happy to help.
Awesome. And then somebody else wrote, I think that's the best advice. Spend a lot of time and effort getting the right team together. There's no doubt about it. And you shared it in your story. You know, when you were struggling, you had this realization that I'm not building a team around me. And you went on a mission to do that. And, you know, that is the, you know, you made a post a couple months ago, and you chime in on this every so often, which I think is a great reminder of, you know, if you want to be freed up from your business where you can do true business ownership and just working on the business and the team, you've got to build a team around you. So I'm glad that was somebody's takeaway there.
Good.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Jef. Everybody else, we will see you again next time on the next episode. Thanks so much, Jef.
Thank you, Kyle. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.